Good news for all of you because as the lady kindly introduced me, he's got a lot more experience and credibility in this space. Some of the things she didn't get to say was Shailesh Haribhakti is also the chairman of the National Pension Trust, chairman of L&T Finance, and chairman of the Future Lifestyle Group. Very much a household name when it comes to governance, risk, and compliance. You will unfortunately still have to hear a little bit from me as I'm on stage, but I'll let Shailesh Bhai do the honors.
Thank you very much, and you must pardon me because this is a last-minute switch, and so you are going to have to tolerate my coordination of the panel as opposed to Pradeep's expertise. Besides everything that was said about Pradeep, let me tell you that he is a person who connects brilliantly with executive management at the highest level across the globe. And that is what sets him apart as a professional and as a person who delivers great value. About Guru Malladi, let me mention offline, I know that from his focus on government work, he's now moved into the more exciting space of digital transformation of companies. And maybe some of the things he'll say today will be in that space. Mr. Balasubramanian Ramaswamy, who has already been fully well introduced, had a very exciting set of earlier companies that he worked for, which included Visteon, Coca-Cola, ExxonMobil, in all of which he worked as their internal auditor. And so he brings to this panel some extraordinary insights into the word protection. And I'm sure that he will dwell on that word in the title of this session. Well, let me begin by putting forward to you the new world as we see it from the GRC space. The title of this entire two-day program is The Next Trillion. And when we were thinking about it as a panel offline, we were wondering where the next trillion is likely to come from. We must accept and know the fact that the first $2 trillion of GDP in India came largely from physical assets and from our penchant for making sure that we kept enhancing the household assets in terms of real assets. Houses we lived in, houses we invested in, commercial spaces, gold. Now, the next trillion, we believe, is going to come largely from an asset-light model, a platform-based, brand-driven model, where reputation, both online and physical, and the experiential reputation that organizations can actually develop. Ultimately, everything depends on how you felt dealing with Google or Amazon or L&T or whichever other company that you're thinking about. And that is going to drive the next trillion. And so I think that becomes a very important insight to hold when you absorb what this panel is going to put in front of you. The other thing about governance that we thought we should share with you in the beginning is that the governance pyramid now needs to be inverted. We were spending in the past almost 60% of the time in matters which related to control, the C part of the GRC. Because there was so much regulation, so much to make sure that you were in compliance with. Today, thanks to the efforts made by various companies, including Thomson, Reuters in a very big way, the entire process of being compliant has got completely automated. The digital world has taken charge of compliance. And because we today have dashboards and alerts and very quick response capability to make sure that if there is even a attempted non-compliance or a inadvertent non-compliance, it will go up to the highest level in an organization and actually get corrected. Therefore, the time that was being spent in the C part has to be ceded significantly to the part which deals with strategy. And strategy will be informed by risk. So risk goes right up there into the highest quadrant. Because risk emerges both from the external world and the internal world. And then there is the middle portion, which is making sure that execution is absolutely, stunningly powerful, productive, and creates the value that will make every organization sustainable. Finally, my last thought that I'd leave with you is that we are experiencing a dramatic shift to what I like to call the C2C world. Everywhere I move, I see an attempt to disintermediate. There's no need in an IT-driven, AI-driven, deep learning, machine learning, all the things that you heard in the previous session. No need for intermediaries, or much lesser need for intermediaries. So it is now possible for you and me in a C2C world to actually come together and co-create value simply because we are enabled electronically to reach out. And we can co-opt a whole ecosystem around us because we are all working off platforms to make sure that people who are in the best position anywhere in the world to deliver the value that we seek will come to the platform and help in a co-creating way to actually deliver the value. And so we are dealing with a completely new world where cybersecurity will protect us from the dangers, both external and internal. All the internal audit that my friend will speak about will add tremendous insight and value to that process. And as we get digitized, we will see value getting delivered in an extremely tangible form. So with that, let me turn first to Mr. Ramaswamy, and please share with us some of the insights and examples that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Haribhakti. I will just try to take out from what Mr. Haribhakti has just elaborated. When we are talking about the next trillion, this consists of two parts. One is the creation of the value, the other one is retention, and also allowing that this value is not eroded. Here I would like to invite you into two recent aspects which really hit the headlines very well in a very, very short span of time. One of the most important, very recognized industry figure making a statement about a particular event in an organization leading to an erosion of almost 20% of market value of the organization, okay, in thousands of crores. The other one is much known, which is Volkswagen. The kind of, just the result which came out of the tests being kind of played out, then immediately the entire organization from what it was at one time, just overnight, the complete position is changed. So these are two classic examples. I would like to invite you in terms of kind of reflecting upon where our risks are when we are getting into the next stage of creating the next trillion. Here, I would also like to focus on two real-life examples of the world where we are living in from the previous trillion towards the next trillion, how the environment actually has changed. Two examples I would like to, real-life examples where I have handled the cases, I would like to take you through. One, we have been in business for quite some time. I have been at least for 32 years. And it is like brushing the teeth, doing a reconciliation of a vendor account. It's a very routine process. Finance does it on a daily basis. We encountered a very, very unique situation in this new technology-driven world, wherein a vendor whose intentions were not very clear, and he had his own pressures and problems. There were issues in terms of reconciliation, which are basically accounting issues, just pure accounting issues. That you have sent something, I have not accounted something, I have issued a debit note, you have issued a credit note, whatever it is. There was a kind of a difference, and then this difference, the company needs to release him. But as far as the company is concerned, it doesn't need to pay this money. Because of his pressure, what he did, he started getting into the social media in a very aggressive manner using Twitter. And what happened was that what was supposed to be in, let's say in a North Indian city, it's a very, very small city of, let's say, about 2 million population. But this information, it was traveling all across the world. It was traveling to, I have to say that some of the country premiers were actually reading it, the company law boards reading it and responding to it. And then because of all this buzz around, there was also some kind of criminal charges being filed and things like that. When we really went into the investigation, it was nothing but a pure accounting issue. What this signifies here is that we are living in a time where on an overnight basis, the brand was completely threatened. And it was extremely difficult for us in the governance and the compliance team to actually catch up with the kind of developments, because Twitter works 24 hours across all markets, and people see information even through in the middle of night. The problem is that this is an area which was almost going out of control. How do you really get into and control it? So this is one of the aspects which I would like to kind of give an insight into what really are the issues here we have. The second topic which I would like to address you, which is also relating to the social media evolution. There was, on a casual discussion, a few things came out from some junior level employees, that there are certain things being shared on social media, these are business transactions and things like that, which may have a potential antitrust, what I would say, issue. This was like very surprising for us, at the same time very concerning for us. So this issue came to me for investigation. Then when I started investigating this, much to my shock, I saw when I discovered, I was speaking to almost all the people across India in our company who were handling transactions. And when I started getting into the groups, I could really unearth a parallel set of communication which is going in. It is as big as the email size of what we have. Is almost equivalent to that in terms of the criticality, in terms of the size, in terms of the information being shared. For example, Excel files, for example, information about price setting, information about things which will directly land you into paying percentage of profits as penalty under certain laws. This was very, very shocking for us, as we did not really foresee as an organization that when this WhatsApp or social media was evolving, much of the corporate sector was not kind of giving importance in terms of like, okay, this is a personal communication. But here what I have seen personally is that how much of impact this can actually create. And as entrepreneurs, as well as risk professionals, as people in this space, in the business space, needs to really understand that how much of this impact which can actually happen to the business, to the brand, and in turns the wealth. As Mr. Haribhakti said, more and more we are moving into an area where the intangible value is what is going to be the real value, or rather real value within quotes. And the real value, what we have been seeing, is going to be kind of in a different direction. So as we move into this transformation, it's extremely important for us that how much of what I would say sensitivity or how much of awareness we have in terms of handling information per se, and also using the technology in terms of whether it is going to help us or it is going to be harming us. This is where I feel like when the other respected panelists would be talking about creating the value, being a risk professional, I would like to also see that the risks are being addressed and mitigated accordingly, and we create a sense of awareness. With this, I would hand it over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramaswamy. Guru, would you lead us through your experiences with Government of India and particularly the Aadhaar that you were so deeply involved with, and then link it to your new digital transformation ideas?
Sure. Thanks, Shailesh. Let me begin by a small anecdote, and this was, I think, about 6 or 7 years ago. We were engaged by a company which is reputed to do their enterprise risk management exercise. So they were expanding beyond the borders of India and at a quite rapid pace, and they really wanted to understand geopolitical and other risks, covering the entire risk universe. So we completed that exercise, and there was a presentation about one of the aspects, which is the environmental regulations and compliances, which is quite ticklish, and those who have faced the music, I'm sure you will relate to it, how difficult it can be from a company point of view. So we had this presentation with the CEO, and as like many of these high growth expanding company CEOs, the CEO said, if you haven't got a story to tell me in 10 minutes, you pretty much don't have a story. So you have 10 minutes to present. And there I was standing in front of this person. So we said, okay, this is the work we have done. These are the prevailing regulations. This is what you ought to have been complying with, and so on and so forth. So he said, no, can we just come down to the risks directly? So we skipped a few slides. We came to the risks. There were about 12 of them. So he said, I'm sorry, I already told you that I don't have too much time. Can you just prioritize and tell me what this is? So can we meet again? So I said politely, look, I don't think you really have the opportunity of meeting again. And when you hear the implications of this, you will realize what this is. But anyway, give us 15 minutes and then we'll come back to you. So we reconvened in the meeting hall after 15 minutes. So we had the typical consultants 2 by 2, which comes in very handy for me. And so we projected this and we said, block 1 will send you for 2 years jail and block 4 will send you for 6 months jail. So where would you like to begin? Right? So that's, it's a real incident. And that's how I think the senior management in the organizations have perceived that area to be. And I think, if you look at some of the statistics that we have, they say in 1955, the average life expectancy of a Fortune 500 company used to be 75 years. In 2017, it is 15 years. Right? 52% of Fortune 500 companies are not in that list in the last 50 years. And 12% of them have folded their businesses and went away. And this we're talking about Fortune 500. Right? Not many Indian companies actually appear in that list. We're talking about global organizations. Now, I'm certainly not here to say or scare you and then say they all folded up because they didn't have good GRC practices or they did not comply with it. There are multiple reasons as to why it has happened. And I think today, if you were to look at the last 5 to 6 years, the dramatic changes that companies are going through is clearly something that's fueled by the digital adoption that they have and how carefully do they manage their businesses in a world where reputations are lost before they are made. Right? And it's, as you've just heard what our co-panelist, Sir Ramaswamy, has to share about how the reputations are destroyed with a simple tweet that goes out. So I think we are clearly living in a world that's a lot more sensitive and more vulnerable than what we probably have lived in the past. And Shailesh spoke about the whole shift from physical assets to asset-light economies, and that's potentially is where we're staring into the next $1 trillion money to come from, or $1 trillion to be made. But there are risks as you make that shift. Asset-light effectively means that the reality is that somebody has to hold that asset, but you as an asset owner, what you effectively have is a digital platform using which you are actually accessing or taking services from these respective companies will provide. So the question that, therefore comes in is how, I mean, it really doesn't matter whether you're a startup or a very established enterprise. When you're in social media, everybody's on King's new clothes, right? So there are absolutely nothing that will protect us. But the question really is that we are in a time where you have the regulation that's changing very dramatically. You have technology or the business environment that's become a lot more agile. And the third element that comes in is that you have ever-changing business models. Now, when you have ever-changing business model, what really you're doing business with is actually not the service that you provide, but you are simply doing business with risk. So when you do business with risk, what the kind of importance that you need to give for that subject, I think is the critical question that we often discuss with our clients, and that's what we advise our clients in terms of, irrespective of the size, just give that perspective. The other dimension that's really changing is also the proposition that Shailesh has actually advanced, which is there is a lot that government is doing today. And I have spent close to about 13 to 15 years servicing the government as a consultant. But if you were to look at the pace of technology introduction that happened in government in the last 5 years, it was unprecedented, right? So, it probably comes as a surprise for many, because for a long period, or at least until 2008, all of us believed businesses grow in the night when government goes to sleep, right? But in 2008, all of us had a shock. And then we all had to run to government and then say, bail us out, bail us out. And then we actually woke up that monster. Now they are awake, and they're doing a lot of things. And as they introduce more and more technologies, the question really is about the catch-up game. So the regulators who are often part of the government or the so-called establishment, as they improve their standards, as they bring in more and more controls into it, how agile are you as an enterprise in terms of adopting those practices into your business so that you are in a better position from a compliance standpoint? And I often give this example. It's nice to talk about robotic process automation and talk about we have introduced so many soft robots in our business. But the question is that robots don't take vacation. They don't go home. They have no holidays. They work 24/7. But you have a GRC function in your organization where people take vacation, right? They go home in the evening. And some of the systems and processes that they have put in place, they don't work after office hours. So how do you ensure, therefore, somebody is monitoring or somebody is ensuring the compliance of these so-called bots that we have put in the organization, what they're doing in the nights when we're actually at sleep? I think that's really the catch-up game. And when we look at the digital world, and today the good news is that I think we have many solutions, and I think that's where I'll probably request Pradeep to talk about what some of it that he's solving that problem. There are technologies available, but the question really is that as an enterprise, are you fundamentally asking two questions? That one, as we go more and more social and digital, what kind of controls am I putting in place? Are they in compliance with what the regulators are expecting for us to do? That's number one. Number two, is reputation, which is closely linked with the brand that we talk about, is that the subject that is being discussed at the group level, but not really about a couple of transactions that have happened which past the threshold of some exceptions. I'm not saying they're not important, but there are far more strategic aspects that at a board level or a senior management level that you need to be spending when you look at GRC as an area, to protect the wealth that these organizations have created, or if you are a new startup, you're wanting to create, and B, to protect the brand image and the reputations that we have, which are hard to come by. So with that, I request Pradeep to talk about some of the technology that he's playing with. Yeah.
Perfect. Pradeep?
Sure. Thank you. I enjoyed listening so much that I think I'm going to speak very little so I can continue listening. But not just because of my bad voice. No, for us, I think that this timing is very interesting because you all have spent the last 24 hours making $1 trillion. And now we have to talk about the boring aspect of sustaining it, right? But I think, in our world, as Guru and as Shailesh mentioned, we have a number of enterprise risk management platforms and technologies that we work with companies, of course in India, but also outside India. But those conversations are changing very, very fast, right? Because in the past, we used to go in with very much a compliance angle, saying, hey, we can help you with enterprise risk management so that you can be compliant with these regulations, or that you can monitor certain transactions. But now it's now becoming very much, how do I enable growth with good risk and compliance management? So these conversations are becoming very growth enabling conversations. Right? For anyone who thinks that this is all about compliance and not about business strategy and business growth, the perfect example is what's happening to our banking sector, right? With all the non-performing assets. We have these huge non-performing assets issue, and everyone thinks, okay, it's bad risk management and so on, which it most certainly was. But the end outcome of that is what is getting impacted is growth of the country, right? It is, because what we're going is from the problem of giving out all those corporate loans to now having these non-performing asset issues, we're moving the pendulum the other way, right? Where there's no credit outflows, no credit takes, which is inhibiting innovation and inhibiting growth in the company, right? So really, what a proper enterprise risk management platform does, whether you use technology or use process or use anything, is it provides the right framework for sustainable growth, right? And that's how now the CEOs and chairmen of boards are viewing risk management as, not just as a check in the box saying, okay, I can answer the question if an auditor comes calling, or I can answer a question if a regulator comes calling, but truly to say is, am I putting in place the right sustainable growth models, right? So as I said, our conversations are changing. In the past, when we used to have our discussions about technology for risk, most of the discussions would pretty much end with the chief risk officer. Occasionally, the chief financial officer will get involved, right, just to see what we're doing and so on, so that we have their blessing. But very rarely will it go past that. But now, the CEOs and chairmen are getting very, very actively involved in enterprise risk management discussion, including technology discussions. Not because, initially we used to think they need to get involved to approve the spend or budget, but it's a lot more than that. Because, in fact, I don't want to give names, but the chairman of one of the largest Indian conglomerates with an annual revenue of over 15 billion, he absolutely wanted to be involved not just in the strategy of risk management, even in watching a demo, multiple demos of how the platform would work. And his response to that was multifold. One, he said, is, I'm going to be using the system more than anyone else in this company, right? That was the first thing he said. And he said, so you have to convince me first, because I'm going to be using this every day. And second, he said, that's the platform they're going to use every time they enter into a new business, new project, and very, very importantly, new geographies outside of India, right? So it is really the test that they go through before they make any new investment decisions, new growth decisions. And the other thing they said was, it is very, very easy for them to go to either extreme, right? To make random decisions or decisions in a rush and regret later, or go to the other extreme to listen to the risk officers and not take any risks. Right? He said one of the worst things an enterprise risk platform could do is to stop the company from taking any risks, because for a company to grow, you have to take risks. And what a good risk organization, a risk platform, a risk process gives you is a framework to take those risks, so that when you make mistakes, and you've got to make mistakes, that you fail quickly and you fail cheap, right? Depending on what cheap means, because being cheap is all dependent on each one's perspective, that you're cheap in a matter of losing crores and not losing hundreds of crores, or for a much larger company, it could be cheap, could be losing hundreds of crores and not losing thousands of crores, right? And doing it fast, learning from it quickly. So I think those are the changes we're seeing. While this is positioned as a protecting brand and wealth conversation, I think this is very much a growing brand and wealth conversation, because without this, you can't grow brand and wealth.
Fantastic, Pradeep. Let me just give you one example that might string not just what our panel has discussed, but what some of the other panels have done. So I'll take you to a small extension of a city that most of you would be familiar with, Coimbatore. What was done in Madurai, which is like a suburb of Coimbatore, is an example of the new emerging C2C world. The entire city of Madurai was brought in. So the first insight that you might want to hold in your mind is that you no longer need a single protagonist. You don't need a structure. You don't need silos in which government operates, regulators operate, people who are doing the work operate. If you can get the entire set of citizens of that small city to do all of the below that I'm going to talk about. All of them have rainwater harvesting. All of them separate their garbage. Garbage is picked up and processed, and vermiculture processed to enrich the soil, which most of the people use not just in the public gardens, but in the small little pots that they grow their own plants in their own home with. Everything is clean over there, 100% open defecation free, truly clean new city has emerged in 3 years, simply because everybody put their mind to it. And the communication about what was happening was obvious, was transparent. You could see how homes were looking cleaner, how streets were looking clean. There was no garbage strewn all over the place. People's homes and the public places were both equally well managed because everybody owned it. Now, this is a small example of what can be done if you give up your old mindsets and you adapt everything that we've been talking about. Now imagine what that will next lead to. It will lead to the experiment which has successfully been put into place in Delhi, where, Guru, you come from, where the whole movement is from private schools to government schools. When I heard about this, I was absolutely stunned. In almost every other conversation, you will find the movement being the other way. In Delhi, they have turned the needle. What made that happen? It was this simply the adoption of technology to bring the teacher, learner, and the parents together. The fulcrum around which this transformation has been achieved is successful PTMs. Just very simple technology. But the point that we are making is you can switch reputation, you can transform things, you can bring about huge value and huge change if you are willing to think out of the box and you're willing to accept that the next trillion is going to come from very different sources from where the first 2 trillion came. We have 26 more minutes for this session, and I would love to see a whole lot of engagement from this fantastic audience that we have here. So it's open for you to ask questions, if you like, to the whole panel, if you like, to individual members of the panel. So feel free and engage as much as you wish. Question time.
Good evening, panel. Thank you very much for the valuable information. My name is Govardhan Reddy. I've been to realty business for the last 5 years. And due to this RERA Act, Real Estate Regulatory Authority, and where we are coming from unauthorized, organized industry and right now the transformation is going on because the digital transformation and the RERA Act, some of my friends are already pulled their socks and getting back their step. So from this kind of activities and the regulations, now the 2 lakhs limitation is there for the cash transactions, where the industry is facing the limitations, because the valuations are very low for the purchase. The customer is not ready to pay the stamp duty for 6%, the total amount, because of if the project cost is 25 lakhs and he is ready to pay, the government valuation is about 10 lakhs. Now the difference is 15 lakhs and customer is losing around 90,000 rupees. So transformation is good, but now the problem is the RERA Act is implementing and there is no perfect regulations and rules till date. My auditor and my CA is working on that, and we are ISO 9000 certified, and we are working in a rural sector, not in urban area. So where the people are very less educated and the issues may rise very fast. Yesterday that was only 60,000 for the registration fee, and now you are asking for the 1.5 lakh. What is the difference? And how could we face these issues from the market? And because the rural areas are something a little different than the urban areas, as we know, all knows very well, because for last 2 days we are talking about this thing. Now, of course, it is a good thing, and now we are planning to transform into the other businesses. Because, of course, we may continue, but the thing is, the transformation must be changed in, step by step. Now, all the things are taken the place in the same time, like demonetization, digitalization, and the cash effect, and the RERA Act. So, can you suggest me, can the panel please guide me what to do right now?
So I'll just make 2 or 3 broad statements, and then I'll leave it for other members of the panel to interact. Number 1, India is going through 3 transformations. One is formalization. So what was informal and intuitive and based on just trust and exchange of cash is switching to something that will be trackable, auditable, which will bring everybody into the formal economy. That's one big transformation India is going through, and it is high time that we actually get formalized. The second transformation we are going through is marketization. So in everything, and you heard this at the earlier panels also, they are extremely poor markets which have existed. And it is absolutely important for valuable price signals to emerge, to have better marketplaces where everybody knows exactly what is happening to the same transaction in all instances, as opposed to somebody thinking that you have given it to him for this price and he has paid stamp duty on X and I'm being made to pay on X plus 20%. That trust has to be brought back by being transparent, by being marketized. And the third thing, big transformation that is happening, is we are moving from the jugaad type of thing to a discipline, control, compliance kind of thing, because now everything is trackable. The way in which information has become available. So let's see what might be the long-term effects of this.
Actually, we are very happy with the transformation because there is no competitors in the market right now.
No, so it will have...
As we are working very hard for the transformation and this digitalization things.
What you say, tongue-in-cheek, I fully resonate with. The biggest brunt has visited the small and medium sector because they were not ready for this multiple changes all coming at the same time. And so I have 100% sympathy for that. But I'm saying that we saw in telecom, we started out at 13.5 rupees per minute, and we all paid it when the mobile phone first came. Yes. Today, that is free. So I'm saying we have seen the journey from 13.5 rupees to 0, right? And I'm saying that within 2 years, and this is a prediction that all of you can hold me to, we will have a tax rate of 25% in India. Why? Because our tax base will be dramatically higher. Now, some people will have to change their businesses. Some people will have to take some dramatic steps. But that's something that we need to get either to adopt or pivot, as I like the word that our Google friend was using. You need to pivot. And you need to pivot in a way that you will face the new situation. Or you find something else to do, and that's fine. But I'd like my other panelists.
A couple of points I would like to address it here. One, I fully understand that we are handling a lot of changes at the same time, and being in the change management business, I know for sure that what it takes, really both for the person who is bringing in the change and the person who is undergoing the change as a community. There are two aspects to it. One is basically rooted in our social behavior. I think probably the price what we are paying in terms of rushing into is because of it is too long overdue on this, number one. Number two is the development aspect of it is that earlier the hurdles for a person to be coming into the formal economy or operating into the formal economy, I would say that there were a lot of hurdles in terms of getting into a formal economy. These steps, with now the technology being a kind of an enabler, it is becoming much easier. So I think this is the right time. Plus also one more factor which is at a global level. If we are looking at it today, when we are talking about on practices, we can see that very clearly when we are traveling across countries and when we are reviewing businesses, we can see it very clearly the way how we are being benchmarked or we are being perceived. Needless to say that one of the biggest countries, the perception of, not our country, I'm talking about one of the biggest countries, what is the level of perception they are actually having across the globe? Despite the fact that it's a hardworking nation, it's also producing a lot of stuff, it's also providing a whole lot of goods and services across the world, but still there is a kind of a perception. If we don't need to, if we really look at it and we don't want to get into that, I think it is time that we need to kind of probably shed some of our traditional practices which were keeping us very comfortable when we were a closed economy, and then we need to kind of move forward and leverage the available technical tools, and then be ready to accept the fact. Maybe there would be some kind of a time, any disruptive kind of a change brings in some pain. Yes, that pain is there now. We could see that almost on a daily basis inside the organization. For example, on GST, the payments to vendors, and we are able to see that where is the kind of challenge. But I think there are two things here. One is like sad and happy sad. So it's like, what I would say is like we can consider it as a happy sad kind of a situation.
I like that. Guru? Pradeep,
No,
you like
good,
that?
My name is Pradeep. I have two questions actually. A lot of audience here are from startup background, and when we do mentorship from TiE and all, like 99% of them, they just ignore what GRC means. And they only realize after 5 years down the road, when they reach particular milestone, oh, I didn't take care of the account, I didn't take care of the filings, I didn't take care of the lot of things and all that. So can you please, from a startup perspective, because you all are working for billion-dollar companies, taking care of their risk, but it's important to just see how important the GRC is at the seed stage for the startups also, and it doesn't cost much, because I went through that thing. That's the first question.
Yeah.
And the second question is, there are a lot of investors also sitting here in the audience, and we get to be on the boards of the startups and all like. So it'll be nice to tell us that what are the risks for us to become a board of a startup. Should we accept it? Should we not accept it? Or just be an advisory or mentor? So that will be two questions to the panel. Thank you.
Fantastic from TiE point of view, and I'll again just give very brief perspective. The answer to the question of whether to get on to the startup boards or not is related to the first question. If the startups are willing to be disciplined at a reasonable cost, today you can get outsourced compliance services because they're all digitized, they're all automated. No law in our country today, the company law has become a moving law. It changes every day by notification. So if you do not have a digital ability to track what applies to you, you're likely to get lost. And so that has become mandatory and inevitable. The same goes for GST. It's the first 100% zero contact with the department oriented, completely IT-enabled law. So the two big pieces of legislation that India has seen are both leading us to an IT-enabled compliance. And therefore, this lends itself easily to outsourcing. And there are various firms all over the country which would do this on an outsourced basis. If you have that kind of compliance, and the attitude every startup should have is that I'm going to get into my next round of funding tomorrow morning, and I'm going to get a diligence done by Guru, or Guru's firm. Just imagine Ernst & Young coming and doing your diligence. You just got to be prepared. And it helps you because the investors in the room will then feel encouraged to actually invest as well as trust what they are getting in terms of the information from whatever stage the startup is at. And I can share with you, having worked extensively with startups, that it really doesn't matter what is the outcome of what you have done. What is important is to show that you had the right intent and that you are willing to be transparent. You're willing to say that, yes, I need to tweak my business model. I'm at it. In the meantime, I made this kind of loss, but I know that there is a whole wide market there. My idea is good. My thesis is valid, and I'll be able to transform. So that would be my two-part answer to your two questions.
I'll try to add to that. I'll try to address the second part of your question, which is investors. I don't want to say whether investors should be on the board or not, or should take it up or not, but perhaps we can share some insights on what role an investor, should perform on the board, right? So let's split GRC because they have three very, very different things. C is compliance, and I think Shailesh just talked about there are ways you can do it. You know, a lot of startups, I would imagine, think it's very expensive, but particularly in our country, we're fortunate there's some very low-cost, inexpensive ways to be compliant to regulations and whatnot. So we'll leave that aside. Comes governance and risk. So I actually believe investors who are on the boards have a huge role to play in this, right? And I also think this is one of the biggest causes of friction between investors and the startups traditionally. And that's because, you know, in my modest opinion, I think sometimes investors misunderstand their role. I think the role shouldn't be to say, I'm going to enforce governance and risk management, but instead kind of educate, saying, because most startups by nature think things like governance and risk management kind of restrict or constrain their style of being innovative and creative and whatnot. But instead, if we can get them to, you know, create the awareness that it can actually help you be even more creative and innovative, right? Because what a good governance and risk management framework does for a startup, I think, is if you're going to try and fail in something, which you have to, I would think. I've never owned a startup, but I would think if you're a good startup would have tried and failed in a few things, it has to help you try and fail fast and fail cheap, right? Because that's the, you know, Airbnb or Uber or whatever, you know, I'm sure they've tried 3 or 4 ideas before this idea worked. But what a good risk management, what a good governance framework does, it helps you try ideas quickly, fail quickly, so you can learn and move on to the next good idea. So I think the role of the investor should be to create awareness and help the startups see that part. Because the last thing I think an investor wants is for a promoter or founder of a startup to be spending 30-40% of their time every day figuring out running their governance committees and risk frameworks and looking at 2x2s and all of those things, right? So you really want your promoter to do what they're good at, but instead give them these frameworks and some guardrails so that they understand this is going to help you try out things faster. So not an answer to your question, but I think the friction I see is mostly, I think, along those lines.
This is, in fact, one of the questions that often, I work closely with a number of startups, particularly at the growth stage in terms of providing the management support and advice. And this is an example that I often, and invariably they come back and ask the same question that, and I think what is more bothering for them, between that GR and C, it's largely about G, right, which is the governance, which they think is almost stifling their, the freestyle of working. And I often give them this example. The rules of the jungle demands that a baby animal learns the rules on its own. And if it trespasses, it gets eaten by the lion. Now, we are obviously a lot more intellectually powerful, and we certainly don't have predatory lions running around marking their territories, and if only you trespass, they eat you away. So we are fairly safe that way, right? But yet to think that we cannot adopt to something which is what's generally acceptable in the community that we want to exist. And the reality is that we do coexist in that community, whether we are a startup or an established organization. And I think the moment they get that realization, that it is actually helping us in terms of growing this more faster, or if you have to fail cheaper, as borrowing what Pradeep spoke about, I think that's where they begin to adopt these much more closely. That's number one. Number two, a lot of compliances which often sort of remained in a burdensome area, today have been a lot more simplified by the government and the various regulators that we have. And I think following GRC, according to me, is like a student who keeps postponing their academics until the week before the exam, right? And suddenly you got so much to cover. And then you call, an accounting firm or a risk management firm and then say, you know what, I haven't caught up all this while with what's happening around. Can you just teach me? But actually, if you practice that, whether you're an established or a startup, the habit of just making yourself aware of what's happening around in the business that you're operating, it becomes a lot more easier, like the exam for the more intelligent, bright students at the end of the year, I suppose. So I think the role of advisors or getting onto the boards, mainly because these, by very definition, they have resources where they're a lot more evolved in some of those areas. I think if the startup, as Shailesh spoke about, if they are willing to listen to your advice, I think it's a treasure of knowledge that you can really bring to the board and provide the kind of protection that's required for these businesses. And the last, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you're a startup or an established. All it took is a small officer in an unknown village in UP, right, to talk about noodles that we all saw, right? So it doesn't matter. I mean, how big you are, how small the officer who's coming after you. And I think that's about being a bit agile. So that probably will provide safeguards for these businesses.
Just one point I would like to add on this, more from, again, a behavioral aspect. Much of the times when we are looking at the rules, especially inside a business setting or in a corporate environment, we would like to only see that how do we comply with the law. But what happens is much of the principles those are going behind in terms of the lawmaking itself is being kind of missed out. And because of that, the benefits what are supposed to come to you is also getting missed out. So the point is that if we are able to see that why a law has been enacted and why is it asking. A classic example is the Sarbanes-Oxley Act legislation which came into place, which was mandating a COSO framework. If you really look into the COSO components, like they are talking about things which are like nothing but wisdom, plain wisdom, and good practices and conduct, and they have not invented anything. They're talking about have a good environment, and then have your businesses risk assessed, document your processes, document the changes, train people, and then monitor it. This is nothing new. I mean, we have been doing businesses for centuries or thousands of years across the globe. The point what was missing was that we tried to actually go too much technical into it and then try to, there's a classic example is that, let's say if a government is putting a rule of, let's say 38 microns as kind of a line, then we say that, okay, fine, I would manufacture 37, or 40 microns, and then, so when we are getting into this framework, what happens, frame of mind, what happens is that then we tend to go around, so the entire mindset is how to really go around and not really see that what is really good for the business and why a particular regulation has been enacted. If that is seen in its real context, then probably, even though it may give a little bit of pain in the beginning, but you will be able to see that kind of rewards coming out. I have some very good practical examples. For paucity of time, I wouldn't really want to go into it. I would like to engage the audience into that.
Yes, you had a question.
Hi, my name is Sashi. I'm founder and CEO for Voltus Wave. I just would like to know if you have seen any specific use cases in where we can apply machine learning and artificial intelligence or blockchain in the GRC area.
I've not seen any application of blockchain in the GRC area, but I can tell you one thing, that auditing in all its aspects, including internal auditing, is going to be completely driven by deep learning, machine learning, data analytics, AI. Blockchain, in terms of creating the environment of trust and the open ledger concept, which enables you to see what everybody else is doing at the same time, imposes a huge overhead in terms of system, availability, uptime, ability to see, and all of that. So I know it'll come. We just need to wait it out. I've not seen any practical application, but of all the other things, that's where auditing is going.
Same here. I can't speak for blockchain, but in terms of machine learning and artificial intelligence, absolutely we have use cases, especially in the aspects of screening. So one of the fundamental aspects of risk management, let's say for banks, is around screening transactions, right? Monitoring transactions. So one of the ways you monitor transactions for related party transactions or ultimate beneficial owners or politically exposed parties. All of these are very, very important aspects of risk management if you're a bank who have a huge loan book and who have to monitor billions of volumes of transaction. So that's where we're seeing machine learning playing a big role because we take a lot of structured content, but also unstructured content like news, publicly available news, and you try to screen that news to try and map out a transaction happening between a politically exposed person and, say, a real estate group or something like that, or the ultimate beneficial owner of a particular transaction. For that, only way to do it is just the structured data you have is not enough. You need to mine a lot of unstructured data, particularly publicly available news, and there machine learning is playing a huge role because the machine is getting more and more intelligent, and we're able to map out and identify such transactions better. So I think blockchain will come, but machine learning and artificial intelligence, I think it's well underway already.
We have time for one last question.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh,
He's the,
this guy who's giving the marks.
I think we're almost out of time.
Okay, good. We then save 29 seconds. And, I'd just like to thank this panel and thank Pradeep for permitting me to take his role.
Thank you.
But I must say I've enjoyed it very much. Thanks to all the great inputs all of you gave. Thank you very much.